So the question is, how do you think about and deal with disagreement as an INFJ? I know for me, on probably the deepest, most foundational, kind of basic conceptual level, I don't tend to see disagreements as necessary. In fact, what my INFJ intuition pushes me to do is really follow different viewpoints and ideas or understandings about ideas, interpretations of ideas, all the way down to their base components, meaning looking at what's behind each idea or each set of ideas, looking at the underlying principles that would have to be true for that idea to make sense. And the reason I do that is because what my INFJ intuition shows me is that usually, if not always, there are underlying connections, underlying possibilities that aren't obvious on the surface, but that connect viewpoints that would otherwise seem on the surface impossibly disparate or in conflict. What INFJ, and this will be the same with INTJ, intuition does, is it shows where at the most fundamental level, all ideas can connect and feed into each other in a way that we might not, on the surface, expect. And I feel like for each INFJ, that's in some ways the first step of realizing who they are or believing in themselves, owning that most fundamental part of themselves, which is their intuition. So when you realize you're an INFJ, maybe you first get into Myers-Briggs and come to an understanding of what introverted intuition is. Or even if you're not someone who subscribes to Myers-Briggs, and you come to that understanding in a different way, accepting yourself as an INFJ, realizing the potential you have as an INFJ, figuring out what you should and could be doing with the skills and abilities and passions you have, it starts with owning that particular type of intuition that brings all the different pieces of ideas and perceptions and arguments together way underneath the surface and shows what it could all mean in a connected, cumulative way. So that's step one, but now that I'm getting a little bit older, I've come to see that my particular intuitive way of seeing those connections at the base is itself biased in certain ways. When you first realize you're an INFJ and start to own that about yourself, what you're doing and what you kind of enjoy doing is seeing underneath bias, seeing around bias, seeing why bias is unnecessary. But then when you reach a point of maturity, your own cumulative, singular INFJ vision that serves as the underlying framework for who you are and what you make of things, it is itself biased, incomplete, and egotistical at the end of the day. That's not a comforting thought. But each INFJ has their own cumulative vision. I have mine, and other INFJs have theirs. Usually those visions can actually be like one line. Like you could say, my vision is this, and that would bring all the different pieces together. I'm trying to think of some examples. The first one, I won't go that way yet. I'll bring some examples soon, but my particular framework happens to center around a deep-seated distaste for dogmatism. I spent many, many years living and working in a very dogmatic environment where truth was something that was prescribed as a script, and people became successful in that environment when they were able to take that script and use it in interactions with others, when they would come to the talking points of the script at the right time, and that was it. And to me, that I can really say that living and working in that environment sparked my own kind of longing to discover who I am, that resulted in me coming to Myers-Briggs and realizing I'm an INFJ, because seeing that dogmatism, seeing the way people acted, it just ran so completely contrary to what I was driven to do, which would, instead of just taking a script of ideas and repeating it, looking underneath the surface to examine all those ideas in context of others that seem to contradict them, and looking at points where those contradictions gave way to connection. But at the end of the day, what I'm coming to find now as I get older is that my distaste for dogmatism is really just as dogmatic as those people that I lived with and worked with and would judge for the way they were. I have to ask myself as I get older, what did they see in that lifestyle? Instead of just raging against it with my INFJ-ness of this is wrong, this isn't conducive to truth, and seeing the real underlying meaning, I have to wonder, is there some benefit that these people are getting that I'm not seeing, that I don't understand, in their refusal to question and look beneath their own ideas? Did they get something out of the pride they had in the script they were given to shout as loud as they could with their fingers in their ears, regardless of conflicting facts or alternate interpretations that would go against that script? I don't know. But as I've gotten older as an INFJ, something that, well, this definitely separates me from all of my INFP friends, something that I do that they don't do, is now I'm obsessed with the exact type of people that rub me the most the wrong way, that I see the least eye to eye with, those type of dogmatic people. In fact, all I watch on YouTube these days are the most dogmatic, most stubborn, closed people I can find. And I could spend hours and hours watching them and asking myself, is that real? How could a person really be that way? A way that I just fundamentally don't understand and that runs so contrary to this INFJ intuition that I've identified with, and that's kind of the center of my being and the center of my potential. How could somebody be that way? Is it an act? Are they pretending? Is there something to it that I'm just not seeing? Now, that's all the kind of conceptual basis and background when I think about disagreements. But when I come up from those depths to everyday interactions with people and everyday conflicts, my INFJ intuition does not set me apart or make me superior or make me above the sorts of conflicts that everyone has. If anything, it can make it worse, because my intuition shows me, okay, I can see that this other person in my life is being unreasonable. And because I see that as an INFJ, it's impossible for me to let it go. And that's the case with what we see as INFJs. We don't have visions for their own sake. An INFJ sees something because they are compelled to bring that vision to reality, or to make something real out of it, to bring something fruitful from it, something with results. So if I see that someone I know is being unreasonable, I have to bring reason, insight, truth to the situation. It's very, very difficult for me not to. And as an INFJ, what that ends up looking like is that whatever disagreement I'm in, I can turn it around at any moment and kind of produce this 8-second conclusion, which says, so despite what you're telling me, which is unreasonable, what you actually want, what you're actually going for is this. And what I want is this. And the way that we're arguing right now is not conducive to either of us having what we want for these reasons. So this is what's getting in the way of that. And this is what we need to do to stop it. Basically, treating each relationship or each person or each interaction like an equation. And again, like I mentioned when talking about the conceptual foundation, it could be that there are things I'm not seeing in those conflicts. Maybe the person I'm talking to has a really good reason to spend at least a little bit of time being unreasonable with me. That doesn't seem to make sense, but maybe there's some benefit to them being defensive or cagey or dishonest, closed, prickly. These are the things that I'm seeing with my intuition and that I'm driven to call out. But maybe there's some bigger process taking place in this person's life that those negative attitudes are actually contributing to in the long run, and I'm just not aware of it because I'm not that person. My intuition shows me their values. My intuition shows me what's hindering those values because that's what it does as an INFJ. But I'm not them. I don't have their life or their experience. And maybe my own pride in my INFJ vision that shows me to the true nature of the conflict and the values of me and the other people involved, that's what causes me perhaps to treat people like equations to solve instead of giving them space at any point to just be imperfect. As an INFJ, it seems like we don't accept imperfections in others or unreasonableness in others or attitudes that we see in others that we see are hindering their values. But if you have a long-term relationship with someone, if you're an INFJ and you're wondering if you want any specific relationship you have to be long-term, just ask yourself whether it might be good to reflect on what's likely to happen in the long run if all you do is just keep picking at the other person every time some inconsistency or character flaw is revealed to you. Is that something that any other person would want to live with long term? That you are basically this superhuman prophet that is calling out, divine wisdom to better themselves and to better their life? When you first realize that you're an INFJ and your ego takes hold of introverted intuition, it's unavoidable that you see yourself that way a little bit, at least unconsciously. You're not going around saying, yep, I'm a prophet. I see the truth that no one else sees. But you're not saying that, but covertly it's there in the way that you treat other people. But the older you get, the more you start to realize, me and this other person, we only have so many decades of life left. Do we want to spend those decades picking at each other or being picked at, being annoyed with each other, being frustrated? Or is that way of being conducive to any kind of long-term understanding or peace or even really long-term mutual growth? It's not, as far as I can see. And so hopefully these are some helpful questions that an INFJ can ask themselves as they progress in their INFJ journey, connect with other people, have conflicts, and try to understand what's most important in the long run and the big picture, and also realize that there are things that they just can't know and can't understand and can't see and can't make sense of, particularly the other person's actual real experience of life and the process they might be in of growth, and how you and that other person might best work together to help each other and build each other up in the long run.